Hey, I'm Jake.
And I'm John.
And we are here at the GV office in San Francisco to answer some questions that we often get about starting a sprint. So presumably you're watching this video because you're thinking about running a sprint yourself, which is awesome. But you might have some questions, especially if it's your first time running a sprint. And we're going to try to run through what we know.
Yeah, that process of preparing for a sprint we call setting the stage. And there's 5 key elements, 5 things that need to happen before the sprint begins. You need to pick a big challenge. That's most important of all. You need to assemble the team, the right group of people to work on that challenge. You need to clear the calendar. One of the big ideas in the sprint is to spend 5 days focused on a really important problem. You need a room for the sprint. You need to have a lot of space. You need to have a couple of nice big whiteboards. And you need to have a lot of supplies, sprint supplies, everything from office supplies, paper and markers, all the way to coffee and snacks.
Yeah, all that stuff it really matters. We've got lists on the website, sprintbook.com, and in the book about the specific things you need. But you probably also have some of these common questions that we hear all the time.
Yeah, so one of the questions that comes up a lot when we're helping people plan sprints is, how can I convince my team that this is worth the time? How can I convince my team to spend 5 full days working on a problem together?
Yeah, so if you're in that situation, if you're convinced that a sprint is good, but you're trying to convince decision makers, other folks on your team, one of the best pieces of advice is to make sure that the challenge you're working on really is a big challenge. Because clearing a week is a big commitment. For the first time you've run a sprint, it can seem a little scary. And if you don't know that challenge is really important, it's harder to make the commitment. So choose that really big thing and maybe wait for the time when that project is just kicking off, when people have a lot of questions, and then the sprint is a great way to answer those questions.
Now, when you're planning the sprint, what if the decider, the decision maker, can't be there for all 5 days, or does that person even need to be there the whole time?
Yeah, they actually don't. So it's important to have a decision maker in the room the whole time to help with smaller questions. But the decision maker who's going to actually choose what's in the prototype, that person can just show up maybe for a cameo appearance on Monday afternoon. We often do this in our sprints. And they can also show up on Wednesday, right when the sketches are up on the wall, and they can be part of that whole Wednesday morning activity, or they can even show up after the team has done the critique, unpacked all the ideas, put up the sticky notes that show what the key ideas are. They can just come in at the end and make the decision right then. And that's actually often quite efficient. That works really well.
Yeah.
So your decision maker does not have to be in the room for all 5 days. You can have a great sprint with just those cameos.
Yeah. So in preparing for the sprint, beyond making sure you've got a room and you've got everything on the calendar, is there any other homework or sort of pre-work that needs to happen to prepare for the sprint?
Yeah, that's another common question. And one of the best things about the sprint is that you don't have to do a ton of work beforehand. You can really come into the sprint, get the team together, and know basically what the problem is, and you'll be able to pick a target for that problem. You'll be able to pull out the information from the experts on your team. All the things that you need to do to solve the problem and test your solution will happen in the sprint structure. You don't have to do that stuff ahead of time.
Cool. Well, that's all the questions I have.
Okay, good. Well, if you guys have more questions, more things you want to know, there is the Sprint Book, which we have right here. And you can go to thesprintbook.com. We've got some checklists and more information, more videos.
Tons
like
of detail on all of this. Yeah.
Monday of the sprint week. So congratulations, you're starting on a sprint. That's awesome. By the end of this week, by Friday, you're going to have a realistic prototype and you're going to be testing it with 5 target customers. So one thing to keep in mind throughout the week is that you're going to have a lot of decisions to make. And just keep in mind that you're going to end up with a concrete prototype and you're going to end up with some data at the end of the week. You don't have to make every decision perfectly. You just need to keep moving through the sprint, and getting that prototype and that test is going to go a long way towards giving you the benefit you need to start this project off in a strong way.
Yeah. When you start your sprint on Monday, it's going to be really tempting to start thinking of solutions right away. After all, that's why you're there. That's the whole point of the sprint, is to try to solve this problem. But we think it's really important to slow down a little bit and try to build a foundation first, to have everyone talk about what they know, to sort of share knowledge, and also build a shared understanding of that problem. And that's to make sure that you're not wasting your team's time and effort focusing on the wrong part of the problem. So the way that we do that is to create a map of the problem and to select the specific point on that map that you want to focus on. It can feel a little bit slow to do that because it's basically a full day of talking and writing on the whiteboard, but you'll have to trust us. It's super important. It makes sure that the rest of the week is really fast and really efficient.
So let's talk about what happens, those activities on Monday. First thing, you're going to do something we call start at the end. So that means you're going to fast forward. You're going to look ahead to 6, 12 months, even further. And if this project goes perfectly, if you put on your optimistic hat, what's it going to look like? And you're going to write down a long-term goal that sort of expresses that perfect future. And then you're going to put on your pessimistic hat, or put your optimistic hat on backwards, whatever you prefer. And you're going to list out all the questions, all of the risks, all of the assumptions, all the things that might trip you up and prevent you from getting to that golden future expressed in the long-term goal. Then you're going to make a map. So you're going to make sort of a simple diagram showing how a customer moves through your product or your service. And you're just going to start with a rough draft of that map.
Yeah, all of that is in the morning. So after lunch, you're going to come back and you're going to do Ask the Experts. This is where you talk to people, some of whom are already in the sprint with you, and some of whom may work in other parts of your company, who are experts on some part of the problem. And you're essentially just going to interview them, ask them questions. You should use a timer to make sure that those conversations don't go on too long. But the big goal here is to have them improve your map, to look for things they can add to your map, mistakes they can fix, ways they can enhance your understanding of the problem. While everybody's listening to those interviews, you'll have the team take notes using a technique called How Might We? Now, it's a little dorky, and it's going to feel a little bit unnatural to some people. But we think it's really helpful because it makes sure that the notes are all in the same format. And that makes it a lot easier to organize and sort through those notes later. And that's exactly what you're going to do. After the interviews, you'll paste all the notes up on a window or a wall or a whiteboard, and you'll have the group sort them out into different categories, and then vote on the ones that seem the most interesting or the most useful for building your prototype.
And then you're ready to pick a target for your sprint. So this is the decider's job at the end of the day on Monday. Look at all that stuff. Look at the map, look at the how might we's, and choose one specific target customer, one specific spot on the map, and then look at those questions from the morning and choose the ones that you want to try to answer in your sprint. And this sounds really hard, but by the end of the day, Monday, when you've gone through all that information, it's usually pretty easy for the decider to sort of make that call. And then that's it. The information is booted up in everybody's head. The focus of the sprint should be clear to everyone on the team. And you're all ready for Tuesday, when you're going to actually get to start sketching, coming up with solutions. You've set the stage for an excellent sprint.
Tuesday is about solutions. So no pressure, but this is where you're actually going to come up with the ideas that will become the building blocks of the prototype that you're going to test on Friday.
And the reason why we're going to have you sketch those solutions is because sketching is a great way to move from an abstract idea to something that's concrete, that everyone can evaluate equally. The thing about sketching is that it's something anyone on your team can do, but it doesn't come naturally to everyone. So our process on Tuesday, the process you and your team are going to go through, is basically a way to break down sketching into a step-by-step activity that makes it accessible to everyone.
You might think that you need to come up with a lot of brilliant new ideas to solve your problem, but that's not actually true. If you look at any great innovation, it's actually built on remixing old ideas. And so that's exactly what we'll do in the sprint. On Tuesday morning, we start with an exercise called lightning demos. And what happens in lightning demos is that you'll review great solutions from other industries, other companies, or even old ideas that have been floating around your team or your company for a while. One person will sort of volunteer to give a tour of each of those ideas, and another person in the sprint will capture the good ideas by making a quick drawing on the whiteboard of what people liked about that example.
So in the afternoon, you're going to be ready to turn those ideas from the lightning demos and all of the foundation from Monday into solutions. You're going to sketch in the afternoon, and each person's going to work on their own, and you're going to follow a 4-step process, taking notes, then jotting down ideas, then doing a quick exercise called Crazy Eights, and finally making a finished sketch. That finished sketch is not a work of art. It's going to be mostly boxes and words and the occasional stick figure. And it's going to be something that's just clear and expresses your idea in such a clear way that anyone else on the team can look at it and understand it. When you're finished with your sketches, each person puts their sketch face down in a stack, and then you're all finished with Tuesday, and you're ready on Wednesday morning to take a look at those and choose the best ones. All right, it's Wednesday. It is time to make decisions. You've got a bunch of ideas in sketch form, and now you're going to choose the strongest of those and eventually make a prototype of them. So making decisions as a team is plagued with peril. There's all kinds of ways to get bogged down in groupthink and long-winded discussions. Instead, today, you're going to use structured processes to move through, make quick, good decisions with lots of input, but with an opinionated viewpoint from the decider. Remember as you go that you have this ambitious long-term goal, and the sprint is a great place to take risks.
To make those decisions while avoiding the perils of group decision-making, we've combined a series of structured decision-making exercises into something we call the sticky decision. It starts with giving everybody a chance to review the sketches in silence and think about the parts that they like, the parts they don't like. The next thing we do is a structured critique. So this is where the group gets to weigh in on which components they think we should take into the prototype. Finally, the decider makes the call. The decider decides these are the ideas that we want to include in our prototype, and these are the ideas that we're going to save for later.
And sometimes all of those ideas, they'll just fit neatly in. You'll have one prototype. It's going to be obvious. But a lot of times there's 2 or 3 ideas that are in direct competition with each other, and they all seem promising. That's actually great. That's a great opportunity to build 2 or 3 prototypes, to give them, fake names and pit them head to head in something that we call a rumble. So you're going to end up with either one big idea, one big prototype, or 2 or 3 ideas in a rumble, and then you need to make a specific plan to build those prototypes.
Yeah, we make that plan in the form of a storyboard that becomes a blueprint for the prototypes. And so what you want to do is take the sketches, physically take them off the wall and stick them to the whiteboard to reuse the ideas that are already there. If there are gaps, you can fill them in, but you want to avoid the temptation to think of new ideas on the spot. Those new ideas have sort of an unfair advantage. They're gonna seem really appealing and they're gonna seem really great because they're abstract. But stick with the ones that your team sketched on Tuesday. Remember, if you get stuck or you get bogged down in a tough decision, rely on the decider. That's what she's there for.
So by the end of the day, on Wednesday, you're going to have that storyboard up on the whiteboard, and you're all set for Thursday morning. Your team's going to come in, you're going to pick a spot from that storyboard, put on the headphones, and you'll be able to crank out a prototype really fast because you made all the decisions up front.
Thursday is prototyping day. It's when all of your sketches, your ideas, the decisions you made, it all comes together into a realistic prototype that you can test with customers. Now, on Thursday, you'll need to adopt the prototype mindset. And it's kind of cheesy, but you've got to believe. You've got to believe that no matter what you're working on, there's some way that you can prototype it. All you really need to do is build a realistic facade. That's enough. That's something you can put in front of customers, you can get their reactions, and you can get answers to your questions.
Yeah, with that kind of irrational optimism in mind, you're going to pick the right tools to make your prototype. And this is a quick discussion you and your team are going to need to have. You've probably got tools that you use most of the time to build things. And so, for example, you might normally use Photoshop or Sketch to make your screen designs. When you're prototyping, when you're just building a facade, you want to move faster, you might use something like Keynote. Now, it's not always obvious what tool you should use to build prototypes for services or whatever kind of product it is. We've seen a lot of examples, and just a little product placement here. We talk about it a lot in the Sprint book, so you can check out some of the advice we have for tools for different kinds of products.
To get this whole prototype done in a single day, really just 7 hours, you're going to need to divide up the prototype into different pieces. You don't want one person responsible for making every single part of it from beginning to end. In addition to dividing up the storyboard and dividing up the prototype, you want to assign out a few different jobs. You want a writer, you'll want an asset collector, not a glamorous title, but it's the person who's going to go and sort of collect stock imagery, other things you need for your prototype. And there's the stitcher, and this is the person who takes all the individual components of the prototype and stitches those together to make sure that it all makes sense and that it all flows as a cohesive prototype.
Once you've stitched it all together around maybe 3 or 4 p.m., you're going to gather the team together and run through that stitched prototype or prototypes to make sure it all makes sense. Now, we always make a small mistake or two, and so it's important to leave yourself a little bit of time to fix those gaps or anything that you find. So by the end of the day, you've got the whole thing all set, all put together. You're ready for Friday's test. All right, Friday of your sprint week, and today you're going to satisfy the suspense. You've got these ideas, you've got a prototype, and today you're going to put it in front of customers. You've been working hard all week, even though John and I are still wearing the same shirts. We know that you've been through 5 days of your sprint. And today, all that suspense, all those questions are going to be answered.
The way that you're going to get those answers is by doing a series of 5 one-on-one interviews. So earlier in the week, you recruited customers who match the target profile that you selected from Monday's map. If you haven't done that process before, don't worry, it's all explained in the book. But you'll bring in the customers and you'll interview them while showing them the prototype that you built and watching for their reactions. Meanwhile, in another room, the rest of the team is going to be taking notes in real time as they watch the interviews. They'll be looking for things that went well and things that didn't go so well in the prototype.
At the end of the last interview, you're going to put all those notes up on the wall, and as a team, you'll look at them, you'll quietly look for patterns. So you're going to find those successful parts of your prototypes and the parts that aren't working so well. And then you're going to look back at Monday's questions and see which ones you can answer. Hopefully most or even all of them.
Before you leave for the day and before you officially wrap up the sprint, you'll want to talk with your team and make a plan about what to do next. Now, hopefully you took some risks in your sprint. And if you did, then there's going to be some things in your prototype that didn't go so well in the test. Some places where customers got confused or just weren't interested. You might have a flawed success where overall the prototype was great, but there's a couple of areas that you need to refine and improve. Or you might have what we call an efficient failure, which is where customers didn't react so well to the prototype that you built, but at least you know. You didn't spend weeks or months building that solution and putting it out into the world. You were able to find out in just a few days in your sprint. Regardless of what happens, you'll probably want to run a follow-up sprint. Just keep in mind that that second sprint is not going to take the full 5 days. You don't have to start from scratch. You've already got a team assembled who understands the problem. You've already got a prototype, and all you need to do is update that prototype, find another set of 5 customers, and test it again.
Whatever the outcome is of Friday's test and whatever you decide to do afterward, you're in a great position. You've got a concrete prototype, you've got some answers, you've got some immediate data, and you should have clarity about the next steps. And that's a really strong position to be in, especially for just 5 days of investment. So when you wake up on Saturday morning, you should feel good about the week, and we hope that you're excited for your next sprint too.